Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Hasn't everything been already said and written about the Jewish question, the major issue of the 20th century? Apparently not. Our guest today is psychoanalyst Elisabeth Roudinesco, and she's bringing her part to the endless discussion with her book Return to the Jewish Question, published by Albin Michel.
Hello.
You wrote many things in your book. I don't know if we'll have enough time to tackle all the issues. You write that the Jewish question, being put forward first by anti-Semitism, is now put forward by the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Yes, of course, because the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which obviously still in the current state of things has no solution, it does bring the question back to the fore on anti-Semitism. It's anti-Semitism and not the hatred of Jews nor anti-Judaism. It's in the Arab world and in the Western world, even though it's completely different. But especially it relaunches or brings back to the fore this internal conflict for Jews themselves. It cuts through the Jewish conscience. Because the Jews, between it amongst themselves, and the diaspora, and the difference between the universal Jews and the territory Jews, the conflict is still there.
Well, you ask at some spot, why are so many people being sued for anti-Semitism? Does it mean to say for you that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the fact of being opposed radically to the existence of Israel, has turned into the expression of anti-Semitism, or that anti-Semitism has disappeared?
Well, no, anti-Semitism has not disappeared or gone away, and it probably never will. But there are times, don't ask me why, that's another discussion, but it's eternal, and Freud has demonstrated this. But in Western countries, it's forbidden to be expressed because of the laws prohibiting the incitement of racial hatred. I'm talking about anti-Semitism. So it's repressed, and then it ends up being expressed through other ways. Personally, I've denounced texts on Freud that were anti-Semitic, but not visibly anti-Semitic. People can, in fact, sue you for those kinds of things. If you denounce an anti-Semitic, a masked anti-Semitic text, you can get sued. All kinds of lawsuits out there. But laws do prohibit that. In Islamic countries, it's the contrary. In fact, this is stated, sales have never been better, of Mein Kampf and the Protocol of the Elders of Zion in the bookstores. And it's really interesting because they're exactly the same statements, the same themes, money, sex, and so on.
And it's prevailing in the Arab or Muslim states today, right?
Well, yes, they prevailed, if you will, in a direct way because it's not prohibited, and indirectly in Western countries because it is prohibited, quite simply.
You have experienced it yourself when you were teaching in Algeria, because you discovered that the swastika became the emblem of those defending the Palestinian people.
That's right. I was absolutely shocked. I was 22 years old. I was anti-colonialist. I was teaching young students who were 16, 17 years old, and they had never heard of Jewish extermination or Nazism. And then all of a sudden, the class came in wearing swastikas. And what shocked me at the time was not these poor, ignorant children. I had to explain this to them. I gave them a lecture on the Second World War, but they didn't know. It was part of the collective unconscious that came back. But it's really about their professors, their teachers, who were terrorizing them. You know, the worst thing in the world is fear and stupidity. They were afraid. They were saying, oh, it's a different context, and we don't have to take those off. But yes, you have to make that clear. You have to explain. For me, it was a great lesson in reason. I was able to explain, and I think you have to do that when you can. You can't allow this kind of thing to happen.
Elisabeth Roudinesco, if today the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is the main vehicle for anti-Semitism, does it mean to say that if this issue could be settled by a peace agreement, a reconciliation, you name it, does it mean to say that anti-Semitism would disappear from the Islamic states?
No, but it would be much more repressed. That would mean there would be laws, like in Western countries, prohibiting this type of expression. You know, there was the war, there was the World War, so it's being expressed indirectly. It would be diminished, yes.
But the psychoanalyst is for repression or expression?
Well, the thing is, repression is unavoidable. What we do is we analyze the repression. But you can't be for or against it. It's just there. Anti-Semitic repression is it? We had an example that I examined in the book. The words of Raymond Barre. There's absolutely nothing anti-Semitic consciously about Raymond Barre. Nothing, absolutely nothing would allow you to say that he, in his subconscious, had anything anti-Semitic.
To the point when it slips in Copernic, people say, oh, it's a slip of tongue.
Right, well, that first slip up, you could say that because everyone has a slip of the tongue. Now, but the second time, 25 years later.
Years later.
Yes, 25 years later, just before his death. At that point, he slips up, but additionally, he authentifies and he actually says really what he was thinking.
That he's a victim of the Jewish lobby.
Yes, that he was a victim of the Jewish lobby. He admitted it. But what's really interesting here is that he admitted it without realizing it. It did not come out consciously, and he didn't become conscious of it.
Well, Raymond Barre felt persecuted. Jean-Luc Godard, much closer to us. It happened in the past days. He lashed out in an interview.
Well, but the thing is, there's something I really don't like about this, because I knew Jean-Luc Godard, and I love movies.
You like the movies of Jean-Luc Godard, right?
No, this kind of thing has always been around. Everyone knows Jean-Luc Godard. Everyone knows.
Let me just say that he said in an interview that the Jews let themselves taken to the slaughterhouse in order to create the state of Israel.
Now, he said that 40 years ago.
Makes him an anti-Semite?
No.
Well, the sentence is monstrous.
Now, if you make everyone an anti-Semitic, an anti-Semite that says these kinds of words, well, then 100% of people would be, well, actually, no, 90%, because I wouldn't say these kinds of things. But let's say some 90% of all people would end up being anti-Semitic. But for a person to really be an anti-Semite, it has to be constituted. If you look at the great artists, the great writers, their entire work has to be permeated with anti-Semitic remarks. It has to be completely full of that. They have to have participated in inciting racial hatred.
So why is Raymond Barre an anti-Semitic and not Godard?
I did not say Raymond Barre was an anti-Semite. I analyze speeches, words, and okay, you don't sue people for this kind of thing. You don't accuse people. I analyze unconscious speeches and words, and Jean-Luc Godard is something completely different.
We have only 2 minutes left, and we cannot speak about your book of the Jewish question without talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We said a few words about it. You seem to consider that it has played what kind of role in the evolution of the Jewish question, beyond the fact of the people living in Israel, the Jews living in Israel?
Well, what we've seen emerging in a minority of Jews is extremism, fundamentalism. That's what Freud feared in the 30s. We're seeing the appearance of this horrible figure of racist Jews looking at facing anti-Semitic Arabs.
But it's a minority, like a minority of Islamic fundamentalists. But can we reduce the role played by the State of Israel to the role played by the extremists?
Of course not. And the Israeli society does not adhere to that.
Isn't this transforming the analysis of Jean-Paul Sartre, the vision of the Jews beyond the State of Israel, beyond the creation of the State of Israel?
Well, yes, because for the first time, this people are people who has existed from the beginning of time, and their greatness was not having a land, not having a nation.
Freud was very attached to that.
Yeah, I'm very attached to that as well. But in fact, not contesting the existence of a state. That's not the issue. But of course, yes, it has changed the outlook, because you have the dangerous emergence of Jewish extremism, and it is almost racial. And that's terrible. You see that all over the place. Yes, it's a minority, but it exists out there. You see, they say no democracy to make a real ethnic Jewish state. And especially in Israel. Now, the greatest critics of this type of thesis are in Israel. You know that.
My question was about beyond those marginal theses, extreme theses, on the role played by the creation of the state, a Jewish state or a state of the Jews.
state of Jews. Let's be clear, it's not the same thing.
So, because your book is coming years after Sartre's book, I mean, you may analyze those 60 years since Sartre.
Well, I think the greatest risk for Israel would be becoming a Jewish state based on ethnicity and race, where religion and race would win over democracy. That's a contradiction between the word Israel and the word Judah that I've been analyzing. Because, you know, Ben Gurion, who's the founding father, in fact, was very clear, opted for Israel. Israel is Jacob's name, the prophet of three monotheisms, and wanted universalism. And that's what would be good for Israel. Israel should have more secularism with all the contradictions that entails. Now, I didn't say it wouldn't be contradictory.
Elisabeth Roudinesco, just a last word. Without getting into the details, it would be another interview. A discussion about the national identity. Is it legitimate in France?
No, it's ridiculous. And the way that the question has been posed, it's ridiculous. Because what it does is it's repeating the worst of the worst. It means defining, no matter what people say, being defined by race, by communities. And in fact, what the Republic has that is so great was preventing that. You know, we're in a period of extreme regression. And also, look at the words of that Eric Raoult had to Marine Diane. It's absolutely scandalous. We're in this time where, and let me just call back to mind, because I do say this, that all witch hunts are horrible. Witch hunt chasing down a pedophile minister, a witch hunt targeting a filmmaker who's 76 years old, who never had any repeat offenses. Okay, it was a major fault at the time. But it's total absence of forgiveness now. There's infinite persecution. Whereas you want people not to repeat their offenses, but you don't forgive once the act has been repaired, admitted, atoned for, and analyzed. Now, as a psychoanalyst, I can't accept that.
Thank you, Elisabeth Roudinesco. Return to the Jewish question at Albin Michel, and your history of psychoanalysis has been published by Pochotech.
With Lacan's biography.
With the biography of Lacan. Thank you, and stay tuned on France 24.